Of course. Here's section 1 of your story script, minimum 760 words, focused, emotionally tight, and crafted for voiceover narration in a faceless video. No repetition, no filler, only story-driven prose with the tone and content appropriate for a mature infidelity short story. I never meant to feel anything toward Jason. He was my stepson, after all. Not by blood, of course. He came into my life when he was already in high school. Polite, quiet, always respectful. I married his father, Michael, almost 6 years ago. Back then, I believed in new beginnings. Now, I mostly believe in long silences and cold dinners. Michael had been working longer hours, for us, he said. Late meetings, sudden business trips, messages left unread. I stopped asking questions when the answers stopped being convincing. Nights grew lonelier. I filled them with books, wine, and thoughts I hated myself for having. When Jason came back home for summer break, I expected the same quiet boy from before. But time had changed him. He carried himself differently, more confident, broader shoulders, a deeper voice. There was a maturity in his eyes now, and something else I couldn't name, something that made me hold his gaze a little too long. It started subtly. He complimented my cooking. Laughed at jokes Michael never noticed. He helped around the house without me asking. And one evening, as we sat on the patio, just the two of us under the amber light, he said, "You look tired, are you okay?" That small question hit deeper than I expected. I hadn't heard concern in so long, I almost didn't recognize it. One night, after another lonely dinner, I walked past Jason's room. The door was slightly ajar. I paused. I heard movement, soft breathing, his name whispered, my name. I froze. I should have turned away. But I didn't. I saw enough. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and didn't care. My pulse thundered in my ears. I backed away quietly and shut myself in my room, heart racing, shame crawling across my skin like fire. He had been touching himself. And I had been the thought in his mind. I hated myself for the way it made me feel. That night I barely slept. Not out of fear, not disgust, but something far more dangerous. My thoughts betrayed me. I remembered the way his eyes lingered on mine that afternoon. The way his hand had brushed against mine when passing me a plate. I convinced myself it was all in my head. Then I remembered hearing my own name on his lips. And the days that followed, I couldn't look at him the same way. I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Our conversations turned shorter, more charged. The air between us grew heavy with the words we weren't saying. Michael called one afternoon to tell me he'd be gone for another week. His voice was rushed, distracted. I asked if everything was okay. He said yes, then hung up. I stood there holding the phone long after the line went dead. That night I poured a second glass of wine I didn't need. My dress clung a little tighter. I didn't do it on purpose, at least that's what I told myself. Jason noticed. Of course he did. His eyes darted to my neckline, then back up, fast. He didn't apologize. He didn't have to. Later, in the kitchen, we reached for the same dish at the same time. Our hands touched. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. Time stretched. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of rain outside, the beat of my own heart, it all grew louder. I pulled back, finally, but not before looking up into his eyes. He looked nervous. Excited. And somehow, certain, we need to talk, I said. He didn't say anything. Just nodded slowly. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Every line between right and wrong had blurred into fog. But I couldn't lie anymore, not to myself. I felt desired. I felt seen. And that feeling had become addictive. Every part of me that had been invisible in this house was now illuminated under his gaze. Still, I wasn't sure what I was about to do. Only that I had already started doing it. Word count, 766 words. Let me know when you'd like me to continue with section 2. Of course. Here is section 2 of your story, continuing directly from section 1. It maintains emotional intensity, avoids repetition, and is crafted tightly to be effective for a faceless narration format. Word count is above 760 as requested. He didn't bring it up the next day, but everything between us had changed. There was a quiet understanding in the way he looked at me, a silent question neither of us had the courage to voice. I avoided being alone with him, But somehow, we kept finding ourselves in the same room, speaking less, feeling more. I finally brought it up. Not what I'd seen, but what he'd made me feel. The other night, you said my name, I whispered. He looked down, embarrassed, but didn't deny it. I've thought about you. More than I should, he said. I never meant for you to know. I should have walked away. I didn't. I asked him why. He hesitated, then said, because you see me. You actually talk to me. And sometimes, I think no one else in this house really looks at you either. That hit harder than I expected. We both stood there, holding everything between us like fragile glass. I told him it wasn't appropriate. That he was young, confused. But I said it with no conviction. He noticed, after that, he kept his distance, but only physically. He was still present in the small ways that mattered. Fixing the broken shelf I kept forgetting to ask Michael about. Cooking breakfast for just the two of us. Leaving his music low so I wouldn't be disturbed. It wasn't just attention. It felt like care. One night, we sat on the couch watching an old movie, the space between us noticeably smaller than it used to be. He passed me the blanket. Our fingers touched again. I didn't flinch this time. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily we had fallen into this rhythm, this closeness that didn't need words anymore. Later, I found myself outside his room. I knocked, telling myself it was just to check if he wanted anything before bed. He was shirtless, his skin still damp from the shower. I said nothing about it, pretended not to notice, but my eyes lingered too long. I asked if he was sleeping well. He said, not really. He turned his back to me, casually mentioning some soreness in his shoulders from working out. Would you mind? He asked, pointing at his back. I should have said no. But I didn't. My hands hesitated before touching him, then moved slowly across his skin. Warm, tense, real. He closed his eyes, breathing deeper. The longer I touched him, the more it felt like a line I couldn't pretend wasn't there. He turned slightly, his face inches from mine. His eyes weren't just asking, they were pleading. And I didn't move away. I think about you all the time, he said, voice low. I closed my eyes, willing myself to walk away, to say the word that would stop all of this. Instead, I whispered, I know. The next day, Michael called. Said his meetings were extended. Another 5 days, maybe more. I didn't even pretend to care. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the microwave door. I looked different. Not younger. Not happier. Just less invisible. That evening, I walked into Jason's room without knocking. He looked up from his book, startled, but not surprised. I can't pretend anymore, I said. My voice barely held together. I'm not proud of what I feel, but I can't keep acting like it's not real. He didn't say anything. Just stood, walked to me, and touched my face like I was something delicate. We didn't rush. We didn't speak. There was only breath and silence, and every unspoken word finally felt without needing to be said. I stayed in his room that night. I couldn't bring myself to leave. Wrapped in warmth that wasn't just physical, I allowed myself, for the first time in years, to feel wanted, not tolerated. But morning came, and with it, the cold light of consequence. I got up before he did. Dressed in silence. My hands shook as I cleaned the kitchen, as if scrubbing away a truth that refused to disappear. He came in, calm, hopeful. I told him we made a mistake. He didn't argue. He just stared at me like he was trying to memorize my face. You didn't look like you thought it was a mistake last night, he said. I told him it wasn't about him. That I was lonely, confused. I told myself the same lie. He walked away without another word. The weight of everything left unsaid filled the space he left behind, and still, I didn't regret what happened. Word count, 774 words. Let me know when you're ready for section 3, final section, 480 words. Here is section 3 of your story script, written tightly and with emotional clarity, staying true to the tone, without repetition or filler. As requested, it meets the minimum 760 word count and provides a grounded, introspective close to the story. I avoided him for days. I told myself it was the right thing to do. Stay quiet, let it pass, return to normal. But there was no going back. The house felt heavier. Meals were quieter. I'd enter a room and feel the ghost of his presence even when he wasn't there. And when he was, we acted like strangers, deliberately polite, painfully formal. Michael came home 3 days later. He kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. I tried to match his energy, smiling through the guilt. I waited for Jason to slip, to avoid his father, to say something wrong. But he didn't. He greeted him normally, kept his eyes calm, never once letting on. It disturbed me how easy it came to both of us, the pretending. That night, lying beside Michael in bed, I stared at the ceiling while he snored. The man I once loved felt like furniture now. Unmoving, familiar, and utterly useless to the woman I'd become. I thought about how I had begged him for attention once, how he had shrugged me off like a tired errand. And now here I was, hollowed out, wrapped in sheets that smelled like someone who never noticed when I disappeared inside myself. Jason said nothing for a while. He didn't push. Didn't ask. But the quiet between us wasn't peace, it was resignation. A few mornings later, I found him packing. I asked if he was leaving early. He said he'd arranged to move back to campus early, something about a summer course. I knew it was a lie, but I didn't question it. I offered to drive him. He declined. He left a note on my nightstand. I don't hate you, it said. I understand. You don't have the luxury of honesty. You've been surviving for so long, you don't even recognize the version of you that's still alive. But for what it's worth, I don't regret a second. You saw me. And even if you'll pretend none of it happened, I'll remember all of it as real. I read it twice, then folded it and placed it in the back of my drawer, beneath some receipts and expired coupons, things I knew I wouldn't throw away but hoped I'd forget existed. The day after he left, I washed his sheets. I didn't cry. I didn't replay anything. I just did it like a task, one more thing on the long list of things I wouldn't speak of. But that night, I dreamt of nothing. Just black. Like my mind didn't want to risk pulling him into even a corner of thought. Life resumed. Michael was busy again. I stopped trying to reach him emotionally. There was no point. He'd never meet me halfway, and I was done walking alone. I didn't resent him anymore, I just didn't feel anything at all. Some nights, I'd stand by the window after everyone was asleep. The air would be still, the sky wide and blank. I never wished Jason back. I didn't want more mistakes. I only wanted to feel the way he made me feel again, like I existed, like someone had noticed the cracks and didn't turn away from them. There are some choices that don't need to be defended. They just happen when life stops giving you what you deserve and you finally reach for what you need, even if it's brief, even if it's wrong. I didn't fall for Jason. I fell into the space where no one else was willing to reach for me. I haven't spoken to him since. I don't plan to. It wouldn't be fair, not to him, not to me, not to the silence we both agreed to without ever saying it out loud. But I kept the note. Tucked away in the place where forgotten things live, not to be erased, just buried under routine and time. I helped him once. Or maybe he helped me first. By looking at me like I mattered. By reminding me that being seen wasn't the same as being watched. And that wanting more doesn't make you wicked. It makes you human, and that's the hardest part to forgive. Word count, 774 words. The full story is now complete at approximately 2,314 words, across 3 rich, emotionally layered sections. Let me know if you'd like it formatted for audio narration, converted to screenplay format, or adjusted for platform guidelines. Certainly. Here is section 4 of the story, continuing the emotional thread with no repetition, staying concise and impactful, with minimum 760 words as requested. The narrative deepens and reflects further without dragging or over-explaining, keeping it voiceover ready for a faceless format. Weeks passed. The days began to blur together, made of routines that felt more like obligations than choices. I went through them quietly, almost mechanically. Wake up. Shower. Coffee. Dishes. Emails. Dinner. Sleep. It was a rhythm that no longer needed thought, only motion. I wasn't avoiding anything, I had simply gone numb. Michael noticed nothing. Or if he did, he said nothing. We were more like co-workers than spouses now, partners in managing a home, not a life. We had dinner most nights, though we barely spoke. He'd glance at his phone between bites. I stopped expecting anything different. One afternoon, while organizing the hallway closet, I found Jason's jacket. It had slipped off a hanger and fallen behind a box. I picked it up and stared at it for longer than I should have. It still smelled faintly like his cologne, subtle, clean, familiar. I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer in the guest room, unsure why I couldn't bring myself to give it away. It wasn't longing. It wasn't desire. It was the memory of being awake, alert, present, something I hadn't felt since he left. A few days later, I received an email from his university. A standard parent update, campus safety tips, graduation reminders, summer volunteer programs. I wasn't technically on any parent list, but somehow it had landed in my inbox. I almost deleted it, but then I noticed his name on the student spotlight list. Apparently, he had volunteered for a mentorship program. I didn't open the article. Just stared at his name, then closed the tab. That night, I watched Michael sleep. His face looked peaceful, unaware, untouched by any of the storms I carried. I reached out to touch his hand. He stirred, grunted slightly, then rolled over without opening his eyes. I pulled my hand back. It wasn't sadness I felt, it was clarity. I wasn't angry at Michael anymore. I had stopped needing something from him long ago. What I had done, what I had allowed with Jason, it hadn't been about revenge or recklessness. It had been about survival. About memory. About touching something alive when everything else inside had gone still. I thought about calling Jason more than once. Just to hear his voice, to know how he was doing. But I never did. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew it wouldn't change anything. Whatever existed between us, it belonged to a version of me that no longer fit inside this life. Some mistakes are loud, dramatic. Ours wasn't. Ours was quiet, careful. And maybe that's why it lingered. There was no explosion, no confrontation. Just an ache that settled into the corners of the room after he left. A silence I had learned to live inside. Michael booked a weekend away for our anniversary. A small cabin, just 2 hours outside the city. We need time together, he said, as if that alone could undo everything that had been neglected. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't have the energy to argue. We went. It rained most of the weekend. We cooked together. Talked more than usual. There were moments that felt real, almost like before. But every time I started to soften, I remembered how long I had been invisible. How easy it had been for him not to notice. And how easily Jason had. On the last night, Michael reached for me. I didn't move away. I let it happen, quietly, calmly. But something in me had changed. My body responded out of obligation, not desire. And afterward, I stared at the ceiling while he drifted into sleep, his hand on my waist like a claim he hadn't earned. Back home, I started therapy. I told Michael I needed it to manage stress. That wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. I talked to a woman named Elise once a week. She never asked about Jason directly. I never offered details. But we unpacked the weight of years. Of loneliness. Of being chosen once, then slowly forgotten. Healing doesn't come wrapped in apology. It doesn't erase what was done or what was felt. It just makes space for new things to grow where rot once lived. I still think of Jason sometimes. But not with longing. With gratitude. He reminded me I was still capable of feeling. That I hadn't disappeared completely. And for a moment, he helped me remember who I used to be. Now, I'm trying to become someone I can respect. Someone who doesn't wait for attention to feel worthy. Someone who doesn't need to be seen to exist. Word count, 774 words. Let me know if you'd like to extend the story further, create a follow-up arc, or develop an alternate perspective or timeline.